This One News update is brought to you by ANZ, proud sponsor of the New Zealand Olympic team.
The US Defence Secretary will begin official talks in Auckland in the next hour as it tries to rebuild military ties with New Zealand. Military relations were fractured when New Zealand banned nuclear warships, but there are now signs the American government may be looking to improve defence cooperation. One News reporter Charlotte Whale is outside Government House in Auckland and joins us now. Charlotte.
Thanks, Melissa. It's been 30 years since a US Defence Secretary has come to New Zealand and he earlier arrived into Auckland Airport in a very impressive aircraft and was escorted by motorcade into the city. He will be formally welcomed at Government House behind me in about half an hour's time. And Leon Panetta's visit is a hugely symbolic gesture. Our countries, as you mentioned, famously fell out in the 80s when we did not allow the US nuclear warships into our waters, and we've been essentially snubbed by them in a military sense since then. Our Navy warships weren't even allowed into Pearl Harbor earlier this year. So it's a hugely symbolic gesture that Leon Panetta is here, and we expect him later today to formally amend the military ties with our country. Now, it comes at a time where the US is shifting its military focus to the Asia-Pacific region. Analysts say it's because they're concerned about the influence that China is having on the region, although the US says that they are no threat to China. But it is very interesting that Leon Panetta has skipped Australia, a country that has got very firm military ties with the United States, and come straight to us to shore up our relationship after all these years.
Right, thanks for that, Charlotte. Charlotte Whale, live from Auckland.
This One News update is brought to you by ANZ, proud sponsor of the New Zealand Olympic team.
Tonight, New Zealand is standing side by side with America in what's being called a new era in our relationship.
Our US Defence Secretary is here for the first time in 30 years as a superpower tries to shore up its military alliances in the Asia-Pacific region. As One News tipped last night, one move by Leon Panetta has been to ditch the ban on our Navy ships visiting American ports, imposed in 1984 because of our no-nuke stand. Political editor Corin Dann is following the visit. He joins us now. Corin.
Good evening, everybody. Well, Leon Panetta is holed up behind me here, having a rest after a pretty busy day of an official schedule. It has, of course, been a very important and significant visit by him, and just him coming here was a major step in this relationship, but we got much more than that. The head of the world's most powerful military getting a first-hand lesson in the history of Pacific-style warfare. Mr. Panetta taking it in his stride. And it wasn't long before he was talking up a new level of friendship.
The purpose of this trip is really to mark a new era of deepening defence cooperation between our two countries.
But the Defence Secretary came armed with real policy changes, not just platitudes.
We have changed US policy on Royal New Zealand Navy ship visits.
The dropping of the ship ban, which saw a New Zealand Navy ship blocked from docking at Pearl Harbor this year, a hugely significant move. This is because it isn't a reciprocal deal that requires a change in our anti-nuclear policy.
So in terms of restrictions from the New Zealand side, we're very clear about our policy, and the US has been very accepting of that, and we've moved on.
The shift in stance by the US reflects its desire to have a greater presence in the Pacific region, a presence some say is driven by a growing rivalry with China.
I believe a key to our ability to provide for that security and prosperity in the Pacific region is going to be a very important bilateral relationship between the United States and China.
So where does that leave New Zealand, given its increasingly close links with China?
That shouldn't affect our relationship with other nations. It's not a matter of making a choice between one and the other.
Not everyone is happy with the closer ties, and it should be noted Mr. Panetta didn't go as far as using the official term of ally today. However, in reality, it would be pretty hard for the relationship to be much closer than it is. Also on the agenda today in those talks with Jonathan Coleman was the issue of Afghanistan, and Charlotte Whale has more on that.
Saying thank you to our troops with actions and words.
They are heroes who gave their lives for their country and for a cause greater than themselves.
Standing side by side after decades apart, Leon Panetta paid tribute to the 5 New Zealanders killed in Afghanistan last month, including Corporal Luke Tamatea, Lance Corporal Jacinda Baker and Private Richard Harris, taking the number of Kiwi deaths to 10.
We will do whatever we have to do in cooperation with the forces of New Zealand to make sure that they understand that nobody attacks our forces and gets away with it.
His fighting words followed by a warm appreciation for our wider efforts in the country.
I am very moved by the determination of New Zealand to continue pressing ahead and contributing to this shared effort to build an Afghanistan that can secure and govern itself.
And the role our troops are playing there officially recognised. This week saw the complete withdrawal of 33,000 US surge troops, brought in 3 years ago to counter escalating Taliban violence. 68,000 American forces still remain.
And there will continue to be difficult days ahead in this campaign for both of our countries.
Nations that have been brothers in arms for 100 years.
We have fought wars before, and we are fighting wars together now. And I have tremendous respect for the New Zealand Defence Forces.
History and flattery, the framework for what is now a stronger military alliance. Charlotte Whale, One News.
Let's go back to Corin. Corin, some real diplomatic gains there for New Zealand. Any other significant steps as a result of this visit?
Yes, Simon, we also saw a change that will just make it a lot easier for the top brass of both sides to actually sit down in a room together. There was an old archaic ban, really, that prevented that. So that's been changed along with that ship ban. Also, too, Leon Panetta talked about the possibility, or he would certainly like to see New Zealand, Australia and the United States have some military exercises together. Of course, that raises the spectre of ANZUS, the alliance that we're no longer part of, although whether the government would be prepared to go that far is, remains to be seen. Now, of course, it could be a topic for discussion, though, with John Key. Leon Panetta will meet him tomorrow for a barbecue at a winery. We look forward to the results from that. Thank you very much. Political editor
Its top defence chief here to talk military cooperation with the US. With us, sorry. It is the first visit since we famously banned nuclear warships from our waters, and it carries with it a huge amount of symbolism. One News political editor Corin Dann is due to interview Leon Panetta, the US Secretary of Defence, later on this morning, and he's here with us now on the couch.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. What are you expecting today? How's it going to go?
Well, I'm very excited. I think we might learn, well, hopefully we'll get a few more details about this relationship, which has really moved forward after this announcement yesterday that we will be allowed to send our boats, our Navy boats, if you like, or ships, to US military ports, because that was blocked under the anti-nuclear policy when we brought that in back in '86. The US went, right, well, if you're not going to let our nuclear ships in, we're not going to let you put your Navy ships in our ports. They've dropped that. What's interesting is they haven't required us to drop the anti-nuclear policy. It's almost as if finally the US has just about said, all right, they're never going to change it. We're just going to move around that and make sure we have the best military relationship that they can.
Has it been like that, or is there something bigger going on here, more than meets the eye?
Yeah, it started probably under Helen Clark when we originally sent troops to Afghanistan, and there's been a slow warming of the military relations step by step by step by step. And there was 2 declarations signed, Washington Declaration a couple of years ago and the Wellington Declaration, basically agreements saying, hey, look, we do want to work together closely as a military, not alliance, but work closely together. And that's paved the way for this. There's not really any more barriers left to being in all but a formal alliance, which was the old ANZUS deal, which was New Zealand, Australia and the United States. That would be the final step, a formal alliance. I'm not sure we'd go that far because we've got other relations with China, and that's where things start getting a bit tricky. But you'd have to say now the relationship's very, very close. He didn't call us an ally yesterday, and people get a bit hung up on that, whether he uses that word, but very, very close friends. All those sorts of terms have been used before, but really, we're about as close as we can get now.
Right. What does this mean for Joe Public that's sitting at home right now?
Well, what it means in the big picture, sort of stripping it all back, is we've got this situation where we've seen China becoming a superpower, and it started to expand its influence into the Pacific and into this region. The US might not admit it publicly, but is a little bit concerned about that. And they've said on this trip, and they've been to China, that they're not trying to contain China in this region, but clearly a lot of analysts believe that there is a growing rivalry between these 2 superpowers. And so the US has shifted its military focus, if you like, into the Pacific region to sort of counter the growing presence of China here. So the US is keen to get countries like New Zealand and Australia sort of back on board, if you like, and to bolster that strategy of being more in the Pacific. So for New Zealanders, it kind of means that we are being put in the middle, because we've got these free trade deals with China. We may even do military exercises with China. We've built up these relations. We've got an enormous amount of our future is tied up with that country, the money that we get from them. But at the same time, we're being told by the United States and our government to some extent is saying, well, we're actually got a lot in common with the US. We've got a lot of military ties, a lot of history. So we're kind of stuck in the middle a little bit there. So as New Zealanders, we have to think about where we're going to go and where do we park our allegiances. Now, the government says we can do both. But, you know, some defence analysts will tell you, Robert Asen, I think he was on the breakfast last week, would say, look, it gets a bit trickier. You might have to choose sides here one day.
Right. Oh, it does get interesting. What's happening today exactly?
Well, there is a barbecue. There is a barbecue out at, I think it's Villa Maria on the way out to the airport in Auckland. John Key will meet Leon Panetta there. And you'd expect all these issues to be thrashed over a little bit more in a little bit more detail. But, you know, I think Leon Panetta seems a very personable man. There genuinely seemed to be quite a bit of warmth between him and Jonathan Coleman yesterday. And certainly you'd have to say that relations are very, very good. As I say, whether or not we'd ever get into a formal alliance again, this ANZUS type alliance with the United States, I don't know. What will be interesting to find out is whether they want that, although they may, whether they're willing to tell us that, I'm not sure.
You've got to big that ahead.
Yes, very exciting.
All right, thanks for joining us this morning, our political editor, Corin Dann.
Doesn't sound like a bad day at Villa Maria.
No, not at all. But as a New Zealander, here's a question for you. Who do you like better, China or the US?
Oh, goodness me. Who
Big
do I like
question.
better?
I know.
I think I'm going to sit on the fence on that one.
Oh,
I don't think I'm going to...
Fence-sitters, don't you hate them?
Not a bad place to be in the world of diplomacy.
I've been to both. I've been to both.
Yeah?
Both countries.
Okay.
And I liked them both.
Which one did you like better?
Probably China at the time because it was the Olympics, so...
Let's hope we never have to choose.
Yeah, let's hope we can just sit on the fence like I have.